Hey guys, it's Miss Hardy, and I am recording for Foundations of Health Science. So for today, we are going to do our usual share the screen and come over just some gentle reminders, guys. Mondays are now virtual days, so everyone learns from home on Mondays. You are not required to learn any new information. However, you still may have assignments and things that you need to do. So everyone will learn from home, and then starting next Tuesday, our B learners will come in. So I'm clicking on our daily agenda, scrolling down. If you logged on early this morning, I did change one due date. So what you see in there now is correct. Okay, so for today, you have your discussion post, which is about 9/11 and the tragedy that happened in 2001. Then we're going to review people on Zoom. I'm going to give you those same kind of tips and tricks to help you remember. And then there is a quiz, but I'm going to make it due on Monday, okay? Because it is 40 questions, but that's going to serve too as your like review guide for this unit. So if you have any questions or answers that you can't find, I'll be available all day Monday because we're here at school, even though you guys aren't, to answer questions, etc., etc. And I'm going to delete this portion here because this just reminded me to change in this Zoom because I'm going to post this one that it's due on Monday at 11:59. Okay, so really quickly, we know the discussion is in there. One thing that I want to reiterate to you guys, just to make sure there's no confusion, is with certain assignments, the assignment and where you turn it in at are listed separate. So here is your Unit B history quiz that you're taking, and here is where you turn it in, okay? And just again, for those of you who I haven't seen or maybe didn't log in yesterday, your progress reports went out this week. You can access your grade at any time in PowerSchool, and they are updated as of this week. And quizzes go under the test category. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. So what I'm going to do is click on this PowerPoint presentation right here, the people. We're going to go through this. I like having some of the pictures and such when I'm teaching about the people in the history of healthcare. It's just more interesting to look at than the key. You guys yesterday would have already checked your note guide to make sure that it was correct. So now I'm going to try to give you some ways to remember these people and just kind of explain some things to you, but this should not be new information to you. If any of my Zoom learners have questions as we go through, turn your mic on and stop me because I'm going to minimize my Zoom screen so that I can look at the PowerPoint. All right, so the history of healthcare part 2. Now, again, we've already talked about the timeline in healthcare. So we went all the way from the primitive time to the 20th century, and now we're moving into the men and women who made historical contributions. The fun thing about this slideshow is it still kind of goes through both of them at the same time, which I really like. So in the 16th and 17th century, so we're talking about the 15 and 1600s here, is when we started making true leaps in medical care. Okay, so we learned that if we put a tourniquet around a wound, that we could potentially bind the arteries to stop bleeding. We would use boiling oil to cauterize wounds, and cauterize is just to burn. So we would burn the blood vessels so they'd no longer actively bleed. This is your first artificial limb or prosthesis. That's a peg leg. Okay, pharmacies were called apothecaries. And so now obviously they look a little bit different, not so many glass jars and such, but very similar in their idea. Anton van Leeuwenhoek invented the microscope, and we know micro means small and scope is viewing. So it was how we viewed small things, not something that you can look at with the naked eye. And he was able to basically determine that microorganisms, which we're going to.
Miss Hardy, I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me talking? Susan, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Abigail, can you hear? Okay, so I'm thinking it's Hey guys, we're gonna pause for a second and try to get this worked out for Edwina. She's having issues with Zoom. Edwina, can you hear now? Okay, so we're still trying to get this worked out, guys. I'm thinking it's something on your end. All right, so if you're listening to this recording, we do occasionally have issues with technology. So I am going to stop sharing the screen just for a second. I'm going to let Edwina leave the call and then come back in. Okay, see if that worked. Hi, Edwina, can you hear us now? Can you hear us now? Hello, hello, hello. Oh man. Okay, I will record this and post. Perhaps you can hear that recording. All right, so for the second time, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen, guys, and we're going to go back to Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who created the microscope. Remember, we're going to say that microorganism is a fancy word for germs. So he was able to see those germs under the microscope and, again, connected and supported the theory that germs are what cause people to be sick, not necessarily the gods or any demon that you may have met. Okay, so the average lifespan, 35 to 45 years, not very long at all. All right, so yesterday the list that you used to correct your document, your note guide document, is the people that you need to know. So it's really cool to know that Gabriel Fahrenheit created the thermometer and discovered all these things. However, you are not required to know him for my class. Benjamin Franklin invented the bifocal. So if you see here in these glasses how you have this clear division here, and you may see it with older individuals too who wear just older style glasses. They have that little patch on the bottom that allows you to see different things at different distances from your eyes. And so that's a bifocal. And he also discovered that colds can be passed from person to person. So if I sneeze, achoo, in my hands, and then shake someone's hand or serve someone food, he is the one who kind of connected that that's how these things are spreading. And obviously that's really important right now with coronavirus and COVID. Moving along, Edward Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine. So you can see here that's an actual patient who has smallpox and then her child who has it as well, and then giving the vaccine to a child. So as we progress through the medical time periods, the lifespan is increasing because we know more. We know how to keep you safe. We know more about keeping you well, and we are able to treat more illnesses that at one time may have meant death. Okay, so just a little fun fact there. These are the leeches that we talked about during the Egyptian time period. This is where they secrete that cool fluid that makes the blood run thinner. It makes the blood vessels bigger so you can get more blood at a time. And it makes it to where there's like a special field here where bacteria won't leak through. And then the leeches will actually get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they'll get juicy looking because they are eating so much blood. Okay, enemas were used. This is if you are having issues passing stool or bowel movement, we can now help you. The first blood transfusions, people were provided mental illness. We're going to talk about that again in a minute. Renee Laennec invented the stethoscope, and what the stethoscope does, obviously, is allows you to hear sounds within the body. And what we would do prior to having a true stethoscope was just put our ears up to the body of your patient. But what he realized is a hollowed out tube made of wood in this scenario would amplify the sound so that we could better hear it and maybe better diagnose it. So we know the typical heartbeat sounds like poof, 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 poof. However, if someone is having an issue with their heartbeat, if there's a murmur, which means an abnormal heartbeat, or the valves aren't working correctly, you'll be able to pick that up listening to the heart. You may not know specifically, but you'll know that something is wrong. And he used that hollowed out wooden tube to figure that out. Okay. Next is Florence Nightingale. So for this, I tell everybody to say night nurse, because she established the first nursing school. Prior to this time period, obviously nurses were all female, and nurses did all of the bedside work. Now that obviously means that doctors were all male, and that it was an obvious division in the roles and caregiving of both doctors who were male and nurses who were female. So she said, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to make it professional, and we're going to have it what we call continuity of care, which means if we're all starting IVs, we all need to be kind of doing it the same way. So it became like something that you truly go and get like trained on. She also invented the call bell. So if you've ever had a family member in the hospital and you've been in their room and they have that remote and it has a little cross and red on it and you press it and the nurse comes, that's basically a modern day call bell. Back in the day, it was actually bells attached to the walls, and they would pull their bell and it would ring down at the nurse's station to let them know that they needed something. But super, super high tech now, not even a bell. Okay. We discovered that hand washing decreases the spread of germs. That's what we call infection control. We can control people getting infections because we're washing our hands. Same thing when you have a cold, same thing with COVID-19. We can control where things are going because our hands touch everything. And if we're washing our hands, then we're decreasing the germs. Elizabeth Blackwell, I say Dr. Blackwell, she is the first female physician in the U.S. in 1849. So again, prior to this, it was only males who were allowed to practice medicine. So she became the first female physician in the United States. And remember, physician is just a fancy word for doctor. Clara Barton did the American Red Cross. So I think ABC. So Clara Barton, American Red Cross. And the American Red Cross provides aid or help to people who have been involved in like natural disasters. So yeah, you can go and donate blood there, but also you can, during like a natural disaster, if we were to have a hurricane, then the American Red Cross could come in and provide support and meals and clothes and food and shelter to people who've lost their homes. And so she founded that. So Paul Ehrlich, also really cool, but not on your list, do not need to know, but he discovered the magic bullets, which were a combination of chemicals to treat syphilis. And you're going to see later on we're going to talk more about syphilis. Louis Pasteur, this was some confusion yesterday when we were doing our notes about where to put him. So Louis Pasteur invented the pasteurization of milk, which should be pretty easy to remember since his last name starts like that as well. And so you wouldn't go to a cow in the middle of 903 or Highway 11 and milk the cow and drink the milk, because there's bacteria and diseases that live within that milk. So what it does is it goes through a pasteurization process, which means we heat the milk up really, really, really high and make it really, really, really hot to kill those germs and bacteria before we drink it, along with other things that we do. We know that we typically drink milk cold, so we make it safe for us to drink. Now, of course, in other parts of the world, they don't do that, but those are either based on where they're from, and that's just a family practice, cultural practice, religious practice, whatever. But here in the United States, we pasteurize all of our milk products. And also developing the rabies vaccine. So rabies is a disease that animals get. So raccoons, fun fact, possums do not carry rabies, so let them live their life. But foxes, dogs, things like that can get rabies. Now, of course, we vaccinate for rabies, or you should vaccinate for rabies. If a dog were to come in contact with a rabid animal who has not been vaccinated, then they certainly are at risk of catching it, and that basically is fatal, where it causes the brain to have upset and they start to lose control and they have neurological, so brain issues. And again, it is traditionally fatal because obviously it spreads to humans as well. So it's a very big deal. And so this vaccine truly changed the way, we hunt for wild animals, using dogs to hunt for wild animals, and then just safe practices. Almost done. Joseph Lister, guys, we just say Listerine because that's pretty much what he created. It's disinfectant and an antiseptic. And antiseptics are used during surgery to keep everything super, super, super clean. It kills everything, so we don't want infection spreading. Robert Koch developed the culture plate, so that's how I remember it, culture plate. And what a culture plate is if we were to swab my tongue and wipe it on this plate and watch what happens, things would grow, but just based on what's in your mouth. You could do it with your hands, you could do it with a straw, you could do it with the sole of your shoe. But the culture plate allows you to have a culture sample of whatever pathogens, which are like disease-causing organisms, microorganisms, germs, okay, in that plate to watch what happens. Wilhelm Röntgen invented x-rays. So if you see the x-ray here on the screen, that is the x-ray of his wife's hand. So he had developed this technology but didn't quite know what it was at first. And he accidentally snapped a screenshot of his wife's hand and realized that he could look inside the body for the first time. And x-rays obviously allow us to see broken bones. We can see if there's something going on with the tissues. But this was the first diagnostic tool, diagnostic meaning what we use to diagnose people, created that where we could see inside the body. Okay, so super, super cool. Moving on. Classifying blood groups, so we now know that not everybody has the same type of blood, and if you're an A positive, you don't need to be taking B negative blood. Okay, we discovered that white blood cells fight diseases. Those are the bad boys you want. Growing viruses, insurances, insulin was created. Here's a big one, Alexander Fleming, and you will sometimes see it listed, as Sir Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin to cure life-threatening illnesses such as gonorrhea. In the 19th and 20th century, people were quite promiscuous, meaning they shared an interest in sexual habits that weren't quite safe. We didn't know as much then about like sexually transmitted diseases and infections, STIs, as we do now. So gonorrhea, syphilis, all of those things, chlamydia, were very widespread. So just like right now, we're talking about coronavirus. 5-6 years ago, it was Ebola and how it was affecting us. It's whatever our country is currently facing. And so obviously STIs, sexually transmitted infections, were a big deal in the 19th and 20th century. So that's why we spent so much time working on them. But penicillin now treats those types of things. And at that time, they were considered life-threatening. So now gonorrhea, syphilis, etc., it's not necessarily considered life-threatening. And we use penicillin to treat other life-threatening illnesses as well. So antibiotics, cool, pap smear, cool, kidney dialysis machine to clean your blood. And then I'm going to go ahead and tell you about both of these individuals. I try to remember SSP, Salk and Sabin polio, okay? SSP, Salk, Sabin, and polio. So there are two men, last name Salk and Sabin, who both used the polio virus, one dead and one living virus, to create a polio vaccine. Okay, so I group them together. You'll always see them listed together, at least for my class. So learn them that way. Same thing for these two individuals here, Crick and Watson. I always remember this one because Crick looks like creek to me, and creeks are winding bodies of water. So with Crick and Watson, I remember the winding structure of the DNA. And they actually mapped DNA and they described its structure, which before that we knew that genetics were unique to each person, but we didn't know what it looked like inside the body. And these two men figured that out. So that's really cool. Heart lung machine. Here's your other guy, Mr. Sabin. Sigmund Freud is also one that you need to know. Sigmund Freud obviously made the distinction, or he really went into detail about how the brain is more of an anatomy piece. So all of our brains kind of look and function the same, but the mind is completely different. The mind is who you are as a person. The brain is what's in there. And so he made the distinction or separation between the two, and then he focused on the mind and how we have a conscious part that's sitting here talking to you, and we have an unconscious part of my mind that may be causing my stomach to be upset because I'm anxious. So we have our mind is very intricate and very detailed and very cool. Moving on, we have Christian Bernard, who performed the first successful heart transplant in 1968. If you get some free time, you can Google it, and you'll see pictures that are in black and white of after the surgery finished. It had been so long that people were asleep in the floor because the surgery took forever. Now they can get it done in such a short amount of time with so much technology. But to think that the first one happened in 1968, that really wasn't that long ago, guys. So pretty cool, 50 years. And then my personal favorite to talk about is Dr. Ben Carson. He was the first one to separate Siamese twins. So Siamese twins are conjoined twins, and that means they can be conjoined at the head, the mid-body, the bottom, whatever. So he was the first one to separate twins that were conjoined, okay? And he was also the one of the first ones to refine the hemispherectomy, which is when a person has seizures. You have two halves of your brain, and the wires get crossed somehow up there. And he was the first person to realize, well, if we remove part of the brain over here, then the seizures will be more controlled. Now, of course, not everybody is a candidate for that, but if you're someone who has constant seizures, it may be very beneficial to you. So super, super cool neuroscientist. Okay. And now by the end of the 20th century, we had all these really cool things: birth control, severed limbs. We had Medicare and Medicaid. Hospice, which is a term you'll need to know. Hospice is a program for individuals who are nearing their end of life. It's traditionally 6 months to live or less. And they just help you transition from life to death, whether that be pain management, talking with your family, counseling, planning your funeral. Do you want to donate your organs? Are you interested in, being cremated or buried? Those types of things. We'll talk about OBRA later on. So another continuous fun fact: CT was invented, artificial heart, AIDS virus, Dolly the sheep was cloned. If you think that's cool, then you should definitely take biomedical technology, because we do an entire unit on Dolly the sheep. Genetic therapy. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the first test tube baby. So what happened is we were finally able to create babies outside of the womb. We could take the eggs from mom and the sperm from dad and create what they call a test tube baby. Okay, this is considered the most recent profound medical discovery. And what that means is, before this, we had no way of controlling. This was just a natural thing. Nature ran its course. But now we could truly pick and choose which embryo or which egg and which sperm we wanted to create. And they do this now for people who aren't able to get pregnant on their own, or people who are having babies with genetic disorders. Meaning that we can run genetic tests and find out if, before you ever have arm, legs, feet, eyeballs, when you are literally just a pocket of cells, if you have Down syndrome, or if you have sickle cell or leukemia or something like that. Okay, so super, super advanced technology. And now, by the time we were in the 20th century, the average lifespan is 60 to 70 years, and that's the 1900s. So it's obviously increased now that we're a quarter of the way through almost the 21st century. So you're going to use the information that I gave you over the course of this unit. So we're going to go back to modules, and I'm just going to review it really quick. You're going to use everything that you have. So here we go. You have that initial PowerPoint that talks about the timeline, and then you have your timeline. You have a couple of worksheets here that we did to help you study as well. You have your people note guide. You have your people PowerPoint, and then you have your note guide key to help you make sure you have the correct answers. You have all of that to help you complete your quiz. Your quiz is due on Monday, and you'll turn your quiz in that separate place. But make sure, guys, you scroll down. I made that mistake, did not scroll down to see that there were 40-ish questions. So just be working on that today. Let me know if you have questions. And remember, on Monday, everyone is virtual, but I'll be available by Zoom all day. Now, you may have to shoot me a quick email or call me and let me know that you need to Zoom with questions. But on Monday, I also plan on posting a Quizlet for you guys to study with because our test is on Tuesday, and it'll be the same as last time, multiple choice. It's a little bit harder than last time because the material is a little bit harder, but it'll be multiple choice on Canvas, timed. You only get one attempt. And if you have any more questions, just let me know. All right, any questions? Questions? Okay. Abigail's good to go. Susan, you good to go? All right, I'm going to stop recording.